You were never intended to walk through this world feeling powerless. That spark within you, the one that flickers when you catch a glimpse of something more, something sacred, wasn't a coincidence. It was your inheritance. But over time, layer by layer, that light was covered, hidden beneath centuries of misinterpretations, cloaked by fear-based teachings, and buried under narratives that distorted truth. Deep down, you've always sensed it. From your earliest memories, something didn't add up. The world seemed off-kilter, as if the version handed to you was only a fraction of what truly exists. That instinct? It wasn't fantasy. It was memory. Consider for a moment that everything you were taught about how life works was reversed. Imagine that your mind doesn't just interpret your surroundings, but actually molds them. This isn't a whimsical thought, it's an ancient truth. Protected fiercely through symbols and secrecy, passed quietly between mystics and sages, not because it wasn't real, but because it carried a potency too vast for the unready. The wisdom was always present, in stone, in myth, in ritual. But you had to arrive at the right state to notice it. Long before modern science peered into subatomic particles, before data was enshrined above wisdom, civilizations existed that saw the universe as mind-made visible. The Egyptians honored this. The Hermetic mystics practiced it. And standing at the crossroads of knowledge and magic was a being named Thoth, guardian of divine logic, who didn't create this understanding but remembered it. Through sacred writings, through temples designed with deliberate geometry, he etched into reality the laws that would one day awaken those prepared to see. And now, here you are, not by accident. This message reaches you at the exact moment your soul signals readiness. Before belief systems, before cultural expectations, before you even had a name, you arrived connected, open, receptive, knowing. That silent vibration beneath the noise of the world, that gentle pull towards something deeper was never imagination. It was resonance. But as soon as you entered this world, the script began. Labels were given, rules enforced, truths were dictated to you instead of discovered by you. They weren't malicious, just lost. They too had forgotten. They simply passed down what was passed to them. You were steered away from inner knowing and taught to trust outer authority. Success became a checklist. Love turned into performance. Fulfillment was packaged as productivity. You were conditioned to suppress curiosity in favor of compliance. They tamed your imagination. They shamed your intuition. They told you mythology was nonsense. Superstition was weakness, and ancient wisdom was irrelevant. You were offered answers, but not allowed to ask the real questions. But perhaps the most deceptive lie was the one about reality itself, that it was rigid, unchangeable, detached from you. That your thoughts were meaningless blips, nothing more than echoes in a void. In that deception they veiled the key, because the truth is not that you see the world, it's that you cast it. You are not a bystander to existence, you are a transmitter, a source. Reality is not something you step into, it is something that flows from you. And this isn't a metaphor. This is the core principle known by initiates long before science scratched the surface of it. Thoth didn't build temples to be worshipped in. He shaped them to awaken memory. The emerald tablets were not poetic riddles for entertainment. They were formulas, encrypted with layers that only the aligned could interpret. He wasn't asking to be believed. He was offering a map that only the soul could decode. This was never about blind faith. It was about vibration. Modern movements repackage this truth and call it manifestation, often reducing it to superficial techniques, chants, checklists, mantras. But the genuine art of creation isn't about repeating words into a mirror or obsessing over outcomes. It's about calibration, about becoming a vessel clear enough to allow the infinite to express itself through you. Your thoughts aren't flickers, they're frequencies. They echo into a field that hears not your language, but your resonance. And that's precisely why this truth has remained obscured. If people truly understood how potent their alignment is, they wouldn't be as easy to manipulate. They wouldn't consume out of emptiness or chase status to feel validated. They wouldn't bow to systems that profit off their insecurity. They would become sovereign. And sovereignty is a threat to control. Reality doesn't bend because you demand it. It softens, it shapes, it transforms when you become the kind of being who is already living in harmony with what you seek. You don't manifest abundance while nursing scarcity. You don't call in love while vibrating with fear. This universe doesn't decode your spoken requests. It translates your energy. And energy is rooted in emotion, belief, embodiment. The first hermetic truth is that all is mind. The cosmos itself is mental. Matter is not the beginning, it is the crystallization of thought. Your world is not happening to you. It is emerging through you. Your feelings, your assumptions, your deep-seated expectations, they form the blueprint. You're not passively watching, you're actively producing. Thoth's sacred knowledge was never a religion. It was a science of the soul. The tablets weren't relics of primitive thinking. They were templates of transformation. And what he inscribed in symbols, modern science now glimpses through quantum insight. The observer effect shows that particles respond to awareness, that presence itself shapes what appears. So what is observation, if not focused mind? What is attention, if not reality's invitation? Yet the modern world taught you the opposite, that mind is private, that thoughts are silent, that emotions are internal weather, nothing more. But this couldn't be further from truth. Your mind is a broadcasting station, your emotions are tuning forks, your focus is a generator, and the field, this living, breathing matrix of potential, responds not to what you wish, but to what you are, to what you embody consistently, without performance. This is why affirmations fail when they are hollow, why vision boards collapse when built on fear. You can't deceive the field. It's not listening to what you want, it's mirroring who you've become. If your inner world is chaotic, unclear, conflicted, then the life unfolding around you will echo that frequency. It is not cruelty, it is accuracy. And that's why this journey is not about adding more. It's about subtracting what no longer aligns. Not more effort, more clarity, not more desire, more coherence. Alignment isn't a hustle, it's a return, a softening into the original frequency that you carried before the world taught you to forget. And when you reach that space, when your thoughts align with your emotions and your actions align with your soul, reality responds instantly. Not because you manipulated it, but because you matched it. Creation was never about force. The sun doesn't strain to shine, the river doesn't beg to flow, they simply are. You too, when you step into resonance, don't chase. You allow, you become. But to arrive here, you must drop the performance. You must release the beliefs that don't serve, the identities that were inherited, the narratives that were never yours. You must stop pretending that your wounds don't matter. You must stop bypassing your pain with platitudes. This isn't about faking positivity. It's about cultivating presence. Thoth's wisdom isn't about acquisition. It's about transformation. You're not here to bend the universe to your preferences. You're here to evolve so deeply into truth that the universe aligns itself with your essence. Not because you're forcing it, but because you're finally in harmony with the divine order that has always pulsed through your being. As within, so without. That phrase wasn't poetic. It was instructional. Your outer world, cannot become what your inner world is unwilling to be. Your desires won't manifest if they contradict your identity. You can't attract wholeness while carrying self-rejection. You can't draw in clarity while anchored in confusion. And this is the work, not the glamorous kind, but the sacred kind. The kind that asks you to confront your shadows. The kind that urges you to sit with discomfort, to lean into what's unresolved, to bring light into the corners of your psyche that you've ignored. Not as punishment, but as preparation. The more aligned you become, the more clearly you see that reality isn't a battlefield, it's a mirror. Your triggers, your obstacles, your disappointments, they're not setbacks. They are signals, echoes from the field showing you where your frequency is still out of sync. This truth humbles, it strips away victimhood, but it also liberates. Because once you realize that your world is shaped not by luck or circumstance, but by signal, you reclaim your power, not by shouting louder, but by vibrating truer. You are always manifesting. Every moment, every breath, every subtle belief reverberates through the field. The question isn't whether you manifest, it's whether you're aware of what you're manifesting right now. That awareness is the true initiation. It doesn't require a robe or a temple. It requires presence, to see clearly, to feel fully, to choose honestly. That is alignment. That is manifestation. That is remembrance. And you're already doing it. From the very beginning, you were more than the sum of your experiences, but the systems built around you, the walls of culture, language, and expectation, were not designed to nourish that knowing. They were created to suppress it, and so your power was not stolen. It was traded slowly, unknowingly, for approval, for comfort, for the illusion of belonging. You were taught to shrink, to second guess, to hold back the fullness of your being so that you would fit the mold carved long before you arrived. But now something stirs, a restlessness that no amount of distraction can silence, a hum beneath the surface of your life that calls you inward. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it simply waits for you to stop running, to pause long enough to feel its rhythm. This is the invitation, not to become someone new, but to strip away the stories that kept you from remembering who you've always been. For ages, humanity has misunderstood power. We've linked it with dominance, status, wealth. But real power isn't visible in material gain. It's felt in clarity. It lives in the center of the being who has nothing to prove. It resonates from those who no longer need external validation to feel complete. True power doesn't shout, it radiates, and that is what the ancients guarded. Not a spell book or a set of rules, but a vibration. One so pure, so harmonized, that reality itself responds without resistance. This is what manifestation actually is. Not a transaction, not a technique. It's the natural consequence of internal truth. When your beliefs, feelings, actions, and energy stop contradicting one another, when they harmonize like instruments in a song you were born to play, the world becomes responsive. Not because you made it so, but because you stopped interfering with your own flow. The universe doesn't withhold, it reflects. It doesn't judge your worthiness, it echoes your frequency. If what you're experiencing doesn't match what you desire, the answer isn't more effort, it's more alignment. Look not outward, but inward. Where in you are you still holding onto doubt? What part of you is afraid to be fully seen, fully felt, fully expressed? You cannot summon abundance while secretly fearing its arrival. You cannot embody love while clinging to the memory of loss. These fragments create static in your signal, and the field, this conscious matrix of potential that surrounds and infuses all things, only reflects what is whole, not what is perfect, but what is unified, consistent, resonant. This is why the ancients spoke in symbols, not syllables. Symbols bypass the thinking mind. They speak directly to the core of your being. That's why the spiral, the triangle, the golden ratio, all geometric patterns, trigger a feeling, not a thought. You recognize them, even if you can't explain why. Your soul remembers what your intellect forgot. The temples of old were not built for worship. They were designed as instruments. Every stone, every line, every proportion was tuned to a frequency. To walk through those spaces was to reattune the body, the breath, the mind. That wisdom wasn't primitive. It was precise. And it wasn't just in the architecture, it was in the body, in the rhythm of the heart, in the breath that forms sacred ratios as it moves in and out without your control. You are not separate from this architecture, you are part of it. When you begin to see life through this lens, not as a sequence of random events, but as a perfect choreography of energy mirroring energy, everything changes. Struggles become signals, triggers become teachers, delays become divine timing. Because now you're no longer trying to manipulate the world. You're learning how to harmonize with it. And harmony isn't a passive state. It's an act of deep listening, of noticing when you've stepped out of rhythm and gently returning. Every thought that feels heavy, every emotion that tightens your chest, every behavior that leaves you hollow, these are not flaws, they are feedback, and feedback is a gift. It means the universe is listening. It means you are creating. Even now, as these words wash over you, you may feel a shift, not because you're being told something new, but because you're being reminded. Resonance feels like remembering. It feels like a sigh from the soul, a recognition that you are finally speaking the language you were born with. You don't have to keep chasing what's already within reach. You only have to start allowing. And allowing isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing the right things from the right place. Action taken from misalignment creates resistance, but a single step taken from deep presence can move mountains. You were never meant to force your life into shape. You were meant to become the shape that life naturally flows into. That's the secret that isn't taught. It's revealed, not through force, but through readiness. The deeper you align, the more you realize that this isn't about achieving a perfect emotional state or never having doubts. It's about integrity, about choosing to honor your truth, even when it's inconvenient, about trusting your inner compass, even when it contradicts the voices around you. When Thoth passed down his teachings, he knew they weren't for the masses, not because he was withholding, but because most were not yet willing to let go of who they had been long enough to become who they truly are. That's still true today. Many want change. Few want transformation. Change adds to the current identity. Transformation dissolves it. But if you're still here, if you're still listening, it means you are ready. Not ready to receive more, but ready to become more. Ready to stop living through borrowed definitions and start vibrating with your own essence. That's when reality begins to bend. That's when you stop searching and start witnessing. There is no greater magic than becoming so fully yourself that the world must respond. Not because you asked, not because you begged, but because you remembered. You remembered that clarity is currency, that coherence is power, that authenticity isn't branding, it's vibration. And the moment you stop trying to be anything other than what you already are beneath the noise, you become magnetic. Not just to things, but to people, experiences, places, ideas, paths. Everything that matches your new resonance begins to orbit your life. It's not a miracle. It's law. Just like a radio only picks up the station it's tuned to, Your life can only receive what your energy is calibrated for. No amount of want can override a lack of resonance, and no amount of fear can block what is truly aligned. When the inner is ready, the outer obeys. And so the question is not whether manifestation works. It is always working. The real question is, can you be honest about what you are currently aligned with? Can you stop blaming the mirror and instead shift the face it reflects? This is why awareness is not optional. It is essential. Without it, you are creating on autopilot, building your future from unconscious scripts, reacting instead of choosing. But with awareness, you become the author again, not just of your actions, but of your frequency. And once you commit to that path, there's no going back, because the more you align, the more painful it becomes to live out of sync. The more clearly you see, the harder it becomes to pretend. But that's the gift of awakening. It burns away what's false so that only what's real remains. There will be moments when you're tempted to forget, to collapse into old patterns, to shrink back into familiarity. That's natural. But remember, remembering is a practice. Alignment is not a peak, it's a path. And every breath is another opportunity to return to it. So, don't worry if you're not always in a state of perfect belief. Don't punish yourself for having fear. Just notice, feel, adjust. The universe doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. Honest, grounded, self-reflective presence. That's what it responds to. That's what reshapes reality. And as you keep returning to that state over and over, something begins to happen. Life doesn't just look different, it feels different. Colors seem brighter, time feels slower, conversations deepen. You begin to meet people who mirror your growth instead of your wounds. You start experiencing moments that feel too perfect to be random, because they aren't. That's what happens when you stop performing and start embodying. When your identity isn't constructed by opinion, but revealed through authenticity. When your dreams stop being things you chase and start being things you walk toward effortlessly, because you're finally on the same frequency as them. You don't need to be anyone else to manifest the life your soul came here to experience. You only need to stop being the version of you that forgot, and now you're remembering. Not with your mind, but with your being. You're remembering through vibration, through resonance, through alignment, and the world is beginning to notice. Not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. By now, you're not just hearing these words, you're feeling them. They aren't instructions, they're a remembering, a reactivation, a vibration that aligns not with your ego, but with your essence. And maybe for the first time in a long time, something in you is no longer waiting for proof. It simply knows. You're beginning to understand that this path isn't about effort. It's about removal of the excess, the distractions, the false masks you've worn to stay safe in a world that fears truth. You weren't created to mold yourself around systems that thrive on your disconnection. You were born to challenge them simply by being whole. The world will tell you to do more, be more, prove more. But your power never lived in the proving. It lived in the presence. The soft, grounded knowing that you don't have to earn your place here. You are the breath of divinity shaped into form. That alone carries more power than 1,000 empty accomplishments. When Thoth etched his wisdom into the bones of stone and the curves of glyphs, he wasn't crafting religion. He was encoding remembrance. Frequencies locked into shape, form, and sound, waiting for someone aligned enough to feel, not just read, what they meant. He knew that real teaching doesn't shout, it vibrates. What you're beginning to realize is that manifestation is not a set of steps. It's not a magic trick. It's a state. It's what happens when your inner world become so attuned to your truth that the outer world has no option but to comply. When your frequency speaks louder than your voice, you don't need to chase outcomes. You become the source from which outcomes naturally rise. This is why those who try to manifest from lack often fail, not because they're doing it wrong, but because they're being someone who doesn't truly believe it's possible. You can't wear the costume of abundance while holding the posture of fear. You can't call in love while refusing to open your heart. The field that surrounds you isn't judging you, it's mirroring you. It receives your signal and returns it faithfully. And this is not punishment, it's precision. If something keeps appearing in your life, it's not a curse, it's a mirror showing you the frequency you haven't yet released. That's why most people live on repeat. They think they're stuck, but in truth, they're consistent. Consistent in their doubt, in their shame, in their unconscious agreement with limitation. The moment that consistency is broken, not by willpower but by resonance, everything shifts. You don't have to convince the universe. You have to become the type of being who aligns with the version of life you desire. And becoming doesn't mean adding more layers. It means peeling them back. It means getting so quiet, so clear, that the noise of who you thought you had to be fades. And what's left is the unshakable truth of who you've always been. That's the work. Not to get more, but to feel more, to remember, to return. The power of manifestation doesn't come from shouting at the sky. It comes from whispering truth back to yourself. Not the truth they told you to memorize, but the one buried beneath your bones. The truth that speaks when your fear finally grows quiet. This isn't about bypassing pain. In fact, this path will ask you to meet your pain in a way you've never dared. Because unhealed wounds leak signal, they distort frequency, they confuse the field. And you can't fake alignment when your nervous system is still vibrating with betrayal. That's why healing isn't optional. It's integral. Not to become perfect, but to become whole. Your body is an instrument. Your emotions are currents. Your beliefs are scripts. And together, they broadcast a story into the universe. What story are you telling when no one's listening? That's what the field hears. Not your goals, not your words, not your dreams, but your being. The way your cells resonate when you're alone. The feeling you carry when the mask drops. That's the real signal. And the field doesn't negotiate. It reflects. So when something doesn't arrive, don't ask what's wrong with the universe. Ask what version of you is still resisting your own light. Ask where the fracture is, because every distortion is an invitation to reintegrate. Every repeated struggle is a coded message from the unseen asking you to come back into alignment. Not perfection, not performance, presence. And presence means letting go of the need to force. You don't need to grab at the future. You need to create space for it to land. You don't manifest by chasing, you manifest by clearing. The clearer your energy, the faster the response. The more honest your inner world, the more coherent your outer experience becomes. But coherence requires courage. The courage to stop performing. The courage to feel what you've buried. The courage to be seen even when your voice shakes. Because only when all parts of you are allowed to exist, do you become whole enough to generate a frequency that reality can respond to. The ancients didn't chant to escape reality. They chanted to merge with it. Their rituals weren't acts of begging. They were calibrations. They were invitations for the divine to move through form. And you are no different. You are a vessel waiting to be tuned. This is why sacred geometry feels powerful, even when misunderstood. It's not about belief, it's about resonance. These forms are not decorations. They are frequencies, symbols that shape awareness and stabilize energy. They speak to your subconscious in a language older than time. When you live inside a distorted structure, mentally, emotionally, physically, your reality becomes unstable. But when your inner pattern matches the cosmic rhythm, life no longer needs to push against you. It flows through you. The effort disappears because the obstruction dissolves. That's why manifestation without structure collapses. Why vision without alignment remains a fantasy. You need foundation, integrity, rhythm. And rhythm is only born when all your parts are moving as one. When your thoughts stop fighting your feelings. When your actions stop contradicting your intuition. This is harmony. This is alignment. This is the fertile soil where true creation blooms. And once you feel this state, you'll recognize that the chase was always a distraction, that the striving was a symptom of separation. Because when you are whole, you don't chase, you attract, not a strategy, but a state. This is the wisdom Thoth encoded, not to give you a formula, but to hand you back your mirror, not to teach you how to demand, but to help you remember how to embody. When you speak from alignment, life listens. When you act from clarity, doors open, not because the world suddenly became magical, but because you finally match the frequency where magic already lives. You're not being punished when life slows down, you're being prepared. Every delay, every challenge, every detour, it's not blocking your path. It is the path. It is the refinement, the tuning, the initiation. And initiations are not comfortable. They are designed to strip you of illusion, to burn away the masks, to expose the places within you still anchored in doubt. This is why most people walk away from this work, not because it doesn't work, but because it demands truth. To truly align, you must give up who you were pretending to be. You must let the image crack. You must let the old frequency die. And the ego will fight that. It will call it failure. It will try to hold on. But the soul will sigh in relief, because every death of the false self is a rebirth of the real one. And the real you doesn't need to prove. The real you doesn't chase. The real you doesn't force. The real you remembers that you are not here to get. You are here to express. That you are not broken. You are layered. That you are not lost, you are awakening. And as that awakening deepens, the world begins to reshape itself, not because it changed, but because you finally tuned in to what was always available, waiting, watching, responding. This is your work now, not to become louder, but clearer, not to chase results, but to embody resonance, to live so honestly, so holy that the frequency you emit speaks for itself. People may not understand you. That's okay. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be aligned. Some will feel drawn to your energy and not know why. Others may recoil. That's not your burden. Your only task is to keep tuning, to keep shedding what's not true, to keep choosing coherence over comfort. Because every time you do, you broadcast a signal that teaches without speaking, a frequency that heals without effort, a presence that activates by simply existing. This is the deeper layer of manifestation, not the outer glow, the inner light. And when that light shines unobstructed, reality has no choice but to shift. There's a moment in every awakening when the silence becomes louder than the noise, when the distractions that once kept you numb no longer work, when the conversations that used to comfort begin to feel hollow. That moment isn't emptiness, it's space. Space being carved out inside of you, so the truth you've always carried can finally be heard. You were never meant to be a seeker chasing something forever out of reach. You were meant to be a carrier of light, a conduit through which the unseen becomes seen. The field, the vast intelligence that underpins every breath, every movement, every unfolding, is not responding to your longing. It's responding to your alignment. And alignment begins the moment you stop asking for permission to be what you already are. You were taught that worth must be earned, that peace must be bought, that love must be proven. But none of those things were ever true. You didn't come here to perform your value. You came here to embody it, to wear your essence without apology, to live as the echo of something infinite. The world you've known will try to pull you back into the old rhythm. It will invite you to shrink, to doubt, to explain your clarity to those still committed to confusion. But clarity doesn't owe anyone an explanation. Resonance doesn't need to be justified. You weren't sent here to convince. You were sent here to vibrate, to be so deeply honest in your presence that others begin to question the lies they've wrapped themselves in, not because you preached, but because your being remembered what theirs had forgotten. That is the true transmission. Not the words, but the frequency beneath them. And your frequency will not lie. It will always reveal what you truly believe, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. That's why this path is not about mastery over others. It's about mastery over distortion. You can't align while carrying shame. You can't radiate truth while suppressing your shadow. All of you must be welcomed. The broken pieces, the forgotten parts, the fears you've hidden. You don't heal by escaping them. You heal by holding them without flinching. That's when integration begins. And integration is where manifestation becomes real. Not the wishful kind, not the desperate kind, but the kind that rises from you like breath. The kind that doesn't require effort, because it is no longer separate from who you are. This is what Thoth preserved. Not knowledge to be memorized, but pathways to be walked. Not ideas to be recited, but frequencies to be reclaimed. His teachings were never about escape. They were about return, to the sacred geometry of the soul, to the rhythm of the original self, to the memory of being whole. You were never meant to stay trapped in the cage of someone else's story. You were born to rewrite your own, not in rebellion, but in remembrance. Not because you're broken, but because you were never meant to fit into systems built on forgetting. Your spirit is not fragile. It is ancient. It is electric. It is built for this remembering. And as you walk this path, you begin to notice the shifts, not all at once, but gradually, unmistakably. The way people respond differently to your presence, the way synchronicities appear with startling clarity, the way situations once full of struggle begin to open without resistance. That's not coincidence, that's coherence. The field doesn't reward effort. It amplifies vibration. It doesn't measure what you say. It responds to what you hold. You could speak 1,000 affirmations, but if your body is still humming with unworthiness, your signal is scrambled, and a scrambled signal cannot create clear results. But when your being is aligned, when your thoughts, emotions, and actions sing the same melody, the universe has no choice. It must echo that song. It must build realities from your harmony. This is why the ones who truly manifest are often quiet. Not because they're secretive, but because they've stopped performing. Their power isn't loud, it's grounded, rooted, embodied. They no longer ask, how do I make it happen? They ask, how do I become the version of myself who already lives it? That's the difference between wanting and becoming. And the moment you become, the game changes. Desire no longer controls you. It guides you. Fear no longer paralyzes you. It informs you. Doubt no longer defines you. It reminds you. Even resistance becomes sacred. an invitation to fine-tune your signal. Every friction, every delay, every moment of discomfort is no longer an obstacle. It's a reflection, a message, a clue. And now you've learned to listen. This is not the easy path, but it is the real one. The one where your life stops being a series of reactions and starts becoming a deliberate transmission. You stop waiting, you stop hoping, you start broadcasting. You begin to trust your own vibration more than any advice, and in that trust, everything transforms. Not because you manipulated the field, but because you remembered that you are part of it, not a visitor, not a spectator, a node in the great web of being. A living extension of the same intelligence that breathes stars into existence and carves rivers through stone. Your desires are not random. They are coordinates. They are invitations toward alignment. But they cannot manifest from a fractured self. They require coherence, honesty, depth. That is the cost of becoming. And for the one who is ready, it is a price gladly paid. Because what you receive in exchange is not just the outcome, it's the return to self, the unshakable knowing that you no longer have to chase what was already yours by design. And that knowing changes how you move. You begin to speak with less noise and more weight. You start to walk with certainty, not arrogance. Your presence becomes medicine, not because you try to heal others, but because you finally stopped wounding yourself. This is the vibration that rewrites timelines, that bends the structure of reality without force, that collapses distance between now and what's possible. When you live like this, you don't need to prove you're powerful. You simply are, and power, when truly embodied, is unmistakable. Some will misunderstand you. That's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to activate the ones who are ready. To remind those who are asleep, not by shaking them, but by shining so clearly that they start to stir on their own. That is the quiet revolution. That is the true magic. And it begins with a choice, not to force your reality, but to become the kind of vessel reality flows through. So if you find yourself wondering why things aren't showing up, why the pieces still feel scattered, ask not what the universe is doing. Ask, what part of me is still pretending? What part of me is still living from separation? What belief am I still gripping that says, I'm not enough yet? Because the universe is not your enemy. It is your echo. It doesn't test you, it reveals you. And in that revelation, you get to choose again. You get to release the version of yourself who clings and strives and hopes from a place of emptiness. You get to step into the version who remembers that becoming is not about arriving. It's about allowing. Allowing yourself to feel, to release, to breathe, to receive. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken. You are exactly where your soul needs to be, to hear this, to feel this, to choose again. And the next version of you isn't waiting in the future. It's buried in the present, under layers of noise, under old names, under beliefs you inherited but never questioned. Peel them back, let them go, breathe deeper. You don't have to figure it all out today. You just have to stop pretending you don't already know. Because the truth is here. It's in your breath, in your chest, in your stillness. You've walked far enough in forgetfulness. It's time to remember, to stand in your alignment, to live from resonance, to create not by force but by frequency, and from that frequency, watch what unfolds. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped resisting who you are.